My daughter confessed, I sought protection from the police, but they chose to believe his lies. May sat very still on the edge of the pale gray sofa, hands folded so tightly in her lap that the pearls at her wrist pressed little moons into her skin. The afternoon light coming through the wide windows touched the silver in her hair and the soft velvet of her navy dress. But it could not soften the words still hanging in the quiet room. They seemed to float between her and her daughter, too heavy to fall, too sharp to touch. The plants along the back wall, the big glossy leaves she misted every morning before the neighborhood woke, stood like silent witnesses. On the low table, her tea had gone cold, a thin skin forming on the surface. Somewhere in the house, a pipe ticked as it cooled. May heard it all, but under every sound was the echo of Lila's voice from a few seconds before. The confession that had split the afternoon open. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. I sought protection from the police, but they chose to believe his lies, Lila said again. As if repeating it might make it less absurd, it didn't. Her voice cracked on the word protection, and she pressed her lips together hard, like she could pin the rest of her feelings behind her teeth. She sat opposite May on the other couch, shoulders hunched into her navy cardigan, brown fingers twisting around each other in restless knots. At 24, Lila filled out the space differently than she had as a child. But the way she tucked one foot under herself and chewed the inside of her cheek was exactly the same. Her face was blotched tear red around the eyes. Mascara smudged into soft gray shadows that made her look more tired than dramatic. They looked at Dad like he was the reasonable adult in the room and at me like I was a kid making scenes for attention. She said, I hate that look, Mom. I've seen teachers use it on other students. I never thought I'd see it on officers' faces when I was asking for help. May's fingers loosened slightly, then tightened again. Start from the beginning, she said, voice calm but edged with something colder than the pearl necklace at her throat. Tell me exactly what happened. Not the version you think I want to hear, the true one. She had spent years listening to the stories of this street noise complaints. Lost cats, the arguments that simmered through thin fences then cooled over shared barbecue. People called her Auntie May because she always had time. Always had tissues or a bandage or an extra set of measuring cups to lend. It was a small kind of authority, no badge or title, just trust carefully grown. To realize that trust hadn't been enough to keep trouble from her own child's shoulders stung like a fresh paper cut. Lila pulled in a shaky breath. It started with the trucks, she said. The Jenkinses again. You know how they park half on the sidewalk, half in the street. Everyone complains, but no one actually does anything. Last week Mrs. Alvarez almost had to push Diego's stroller into the road because she couldn't get around their stupid bumper. She paused, as if seeing the scene play again behind her eyes. At the association meeting, people whined about it for 20 minutes, and then Dad did his usual thing. We'll have a friendly word, she mimicked in a lower voice, not unkind but weary. And then nothing changed. So I printed the city's code about blocked walkways and left it on their windshield, highlighted in everything. No rude notes, no exclamation points, just the rules. May pictured it easily, Lila in her sneakers and rolled up jeans, sliding the paper under a wiper with that determined set to her shoulders. Lila had always believed in rules the way some people believed in signs from the universe. Not because she was rigid, but because rules were supposed to protect people who didn't have power. Did they see you? May asked. Mr. Jenkins did, Lila said. He came out while I was walking away and yelled across the street, asking if I thought I was some kind of hero. I told him I thought the sidewalk belonged to everyone. That's all I said. I swear. He muttered something about kids these days and slammed his door. I thought that was it. She let out a humorless breath. Next morning there was a note under my own windshield. Just one word. Snitch. Big block letters. A drawing of a mouth with a fat tongue. I laughed it off at first, took a picture, showed it to Mia. We joked about how someone had way too much free time. May's jaw tightened. She had seen variations of that note in other people's stories. Small paper cuts that sometimes turned into deeper wounds. You didn't tell me, she said quietly. I didn't want to make it into a big thing. Lila said, defensive and apologetic all at once. Besides, you were busy with the speed bump survey and the mural planning and everything. I figured it would blow over. Her gaze dropped to her twisting hands. Then the posts started. She explained about the neighborhood group online, about how Mr. Jenkins's son had posted a blurry photo of a printed flyer and captioned it, "Our very own parking cop princess strikes again." How comments had stacked up beneath it. Laughing emojis and jokes about people who had nothing better to do than police tire positions. No one named Leela, but the implication was clear enough. Some comments suggested someone should give her something real to worry about. Others sneered that some folks' parents forgot to teach them mind your business. 101. At first I tried to ignore it, Lila said, voice low. Then I thought about Mrs. Alvarez and Diego, and the kids who cut through this block to get to school. If no one pushes back, people think it's fine to keep being careless. So when I saw his son at the corner store this morning, I went over. She swallowed. I told him the posts were wrong, that picking on people for asking for safety was messed up. He laughed and pulled out his phone and started recording, like I was some wild animal in a zoo. He kept saying, "Look how crazy she gets when you call her out." He only posted the part where I raised my voice, not the part where he called me a joke, not the part where he said I should stay indoors if the sidewalk scared me so much. May could almost see it. The phone held just so, capturing Lila's flushed face and fierce gestures without the bait that had provoked them. A neat little story, edited to fit the narrator's comfort. And that's what he showed the officers. That, and a message thread where his friends joked about me. Lila said, they told the police they were just teasing, that I came in swinging. She let out a bitter laugh, and then Dad came in with his calm voice. The room seemed to cool a few degrees. What did your father say? May asked. Lila's eyes shimmered. He said he knew I could be passionate. He actually used air quotes, Mom. In front of them, he told them I threw myself into causes, that sometimes I didn't see how intense I could be. He said he didn't think anyone on the street meant me real harm, that this was a misunderstanding between young people. And he'd talked to Mr. Jenkins' man. The officers relaxed immediately. One of them clapped him on the shoulder and said something like, "Good thing you're on top of it, sir." Then they turned to me and told me to stay off social media for a while and avoid confronting people. Her hands clenched into fists. I showed them the second note I got this morning. It said, "Watch yourself after dark." They shrugged, said it was probably a stupid joke. A joke. May felt a slow burn spread in her chest, not the flare of sudden rage but the steady heat of coals catching. She had known Daniel for almost 3 decades. She knew his gift for smoothing rough edges, the way he could charm a room full of strangers, the way he believed that almost any problem could be talked down if everyone stayed calm. That gift had built half his contracting business and made him the unofficial face of their block. It had also, she realized now, given him a reflex, step in, de-escalate, make everyone comfortable even if it meant his own daughter standing alone in the discomfort. They didn't write any report, she asked, though she could already guess the answer. They typed a few notes into their computer. Lila said, I couldn't see the screen. When I asked if we could at least have something on file in case things got worse. They exchanged this look, like I was being dramatic. One of them said, we'll make a record, miss, but try not to feed the fire. Let your dad handle it. She looked up, anguish raw and astonished. I went there because I thought if I followed the steps of Avon's dates, names they would take it seriously. I thought that's how the system worked. Instead they treated Dad like the responsible one, who'd keep the peace in me like the spark they needed to keep under control. For a moment, May could not speak. The house, usually so full of small domestic sounds, seemed to hold its breath with her. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint engine noise from a car turning onto their street. Even the clock on the wall faded behind the rushing in her ears. She inhaled slowly, the way she used to before walking into a classroom of restless teenagers, and felt the steadiness return, thin but present. You did the right thing, she said at last. You saw something that made the street less safe and you tried to address it. When that didn't work, you went to the people whose job it is to listen. That's what we raised you to do. Her gaze softened but did not waver. Their failure to listen does not turn you into the problem. Lila blinked hard. A tear slipped down her cheek and landed dark on the cardigan sleeve. It's not just the officers, she whispered. It's Dad. Hearing him talk about me like that, like I was a project he had to manage. Like my worry was another mess to tidy so the neighbors wouldn't be uncomfortable. She dug her nails into her palms. The worst part is you can tell he didn't mean it in a cruel way. He really thinks he's helping. May felt that observation land with painful precision. Daniel rarely meant harm. That had always been part of the story she told herself when they argued about his endless compromises at association meetings. But meaning well had become his shield. And sometimes shields hid more than they protected. He should have stood beside you, not between you and them, she said quietly. We will talk about that, he and I. She let a breath slide out. But first things first. The officers may have laughed, and your father may have tried to smooth this into something small. That doesn't mean it is small. Lila looked at her, hope and skepticism wrestling in her eyes. What can we even do now? If the police don't care, and Dad's on his let's keep the neighborhood friendly crusade, what's left? May straightened her back, feeling the familiar pull at her shoulders. The posture she adopted when standing at the front of community meetings in the church basement. We remember who this street actually belongs to, she said. Not to the loudest trucks or the smoothest talkers, to the people who walk it, push strollers along it, send their kids down it every morning. We gather their stories. Not gossip, not revenge, just what's true. You're not thinking of going door to door about my drama, are you? Leela asked, alarm edging into her voice. You're not thinking of going door to door about my drama, are you? Lila asked, alarm sharp enough to crack through the exhaustion in her voice. She sat up straighter, one leg uncurling, as if ready to physically block May from heading toward the front door. The thought of neighbors whispering about her, of eyes peeking through curtains as word spread that May's girl went to the police, clearly made her stomach twist. Her gaze flicked to the big front window as though the street might already be watching. I can't do the whole everyone gather in the church hall and talk about my feelings thing. I'll move to another city first. May almost smiled, not because any of it was funny, but because there was something familiar and fierce in Lila's dramatic protest that reminded her of the little girl who used to insist she'd run away to the moon when things went wrong. I'm not planning a parade with you at the front holding a banner, May said. And I'm not going to frame this as Leela versus the neighborhood. That would just turn your very real worry into a spectacle. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, pearls clicking softly as her bracelet shifted. But I am going to talk to people, quietly, respectfully, about what they've seen and how they've felt on this street, because right now the only story the police have heard is the one told by a few boys with phones and your father with his calm voice. So you want to collect stories like evidence, Lila said slowly. The idea seemed to land somewhere between suspicion and curiosity. You really think Mrs. Alvarez wants to get in the middle of this? She hates conflict. She hates conflict, May agreed, but she also hates nearly rolling her baby into traffic because someone thinks paint on a curb is just a suggestion. There's a difference between craving drama and wanting to be safe. She paused, watching her daughter's face. I won't force anyone to sign anything or speak if they don't wish to, but I can ask what they've experienced. I can ask if they're willing to have that written down. Then, if we choose to go back to the station or higher up, we take more than just your word. We take our street's word. Lila's shoulders slowly relaxed, though doubt lingered in the way she held herself. And what about Dad? She asked. Because you know, if he hears you're stirring up tension, he'll have a lot to say about it. She made air quotes with a bitterness that didn't suit her but made sense. He's probably texting Mr. Jenkins right now to clear the air. That's a conversation your father and I need to have. May said, the thought of it settled heavy but solid in her chest. He isn't the villain of this story, but right now he's standing in the wrong spot, between you and the people who should be listening, instead of beside you. She rose from the couch and smoothed her dress, more for the comfort of the gesture than the fabric. I'll speak to him tonight. Alone. You don't need to stand there and listen to us go around in circles. I kind of do, though, Lila said quietly. It's my life they're treating like a misunderstanding. She bit her lip, considering, but fine, one step at a time. If you're going to talk to people, can I come with you? I don't want you turning into my spokesperson while I'm hiding behind the curtains. May's heart warmed at that. We go as ourselves, she said, not as a complaint committee. We listen as much as we talk. If at any door you feel uncomfortable, we step away. This isn't about cornering anyone. It's about making sure the quiet people on this street aren't erased from the story. They went out together a little later, after Leela had washed her face and swapped the teardamp cardigan for a clean sweatshirt. The late afternoon sky stretched pale and high, clouds thin like someone had dragged white chalk across blue paper. The block looked ordinary, kids' bikes on lawns, a dog barking 2 streets over, someone playing music softly from a backyard. The Jenkins trucks sat where they always did, one half up on the sidewalk. One squeezed almost aggressively close to the hydrant. Leela's jaw tensed as they passed, but she stayed on May's left, matching her pace. First stop, May said, nodding toward the Alvarez house. If anyone understands the way a bumper can turn into a small wall, it's them. Mrs. Alvarez opened the door with her usual cautious smile. Diego balanced on one hip. The smell of rice and onions drifted out into the evening air. Hola May, she said, then saw Lila, and her smile softened further. You okay, Mia? You look tired. I am, Lila said honestly, but we're trying to fix why. She glanced at May, Who took the cue? Can we borrow 5 minutes? May asked. It's about the sidewalk and the trucks. She added, no shouting, no drama, just talking. Inside, while Diego banged a spoon against the coffee table and giggled. Mrs. Alvarez listened as Lila described the notes and the posts, the way the police had waved it all away. As Lila talked, the tension in her shoulders eased a fraction, saying it in this small living room, with the faint cartoon sounds from the television in the next room and the scent of simmering tomato sauce, made the story feel less like a lonely battle and more like something that belonged in a web of shared experiences. They told you it was a joke, Mrs. Alvarez said, eyebrows knitting together. That's what they say when a boy in school keeps pulling a girl's hair too. He's just playing. But she is the one with the headache. She shifted Diego on her hip. They almost had me walking in the road last week. He nearly tipped when a car came too fast around the corner. She touched the back of her son's head, as if smoothing away an invisible bruise. I didn't say anything because I thought, who will listen to me about a car? But if they are writing ugly words and sending messages, that is not nothing. That is how people test what they can get away with. Would you be willing to write down what happened with the stroller? May asked gently. Just the facts. Date if you remember. Anything you said or wanted to say? Mrs. Alvarez hesitated. Is this going to make a war on the street? No, May said. What we're trying to make is a record. The officers thought this was just Lila being too passionate. If they see that others have felt unsafe too, they may understand better. If not, there are people above them whose job is to care about patterns like this. She held the other woman's gaze. You won't be alone. I'll put my name on it too. So will anyone else who agrees. After a moment, Mrs. Alvarez nodded. Then yes, she said, if my name helps them take it seriously, use it. She looked at Lila. You were brave to go there. I'm sorry they made you feel small. Lila's throat seemed to close for a second. Thank you, she managed. By the time May and Lila left, they had one story promised. At the next house, an older man who had nearly tripped over a truck's extended mirror months ago grumbled his agreement that the street's not a warehouse, though he balked at the idea of signing anything. My daughter's married to a cop, he said. She says they don't have time for every little thing. Understood, May said. Then maybe think of it this way. Signing would be giving them information in case it's not a little thing after all. She didn't push. When he still looked uncertain, she let it go, slipping him a folded paper with her number on it instead. If you change your mind, or if anything else happens, you can call me. Not every door yielded a clear answer. Some people weren't home. One neighbor listened with arms folded and said, he thought, Lila should learn to ignore online jokes before closing the door politely but firmly. Each time, Lila flinched a little, but she also watched May. Watched how her mother didn't turn brittle or overly sweet. How she held their neighbors' gazes without trying to win or shame them. It was like watching someone steer a boat through a crowded harbor, slow, measured, attentive. I didn't realize, Lila said quietly as they headed back toward their house, how many versions of this street there are. Everyone's living on the same block, but it doesn't feel the same to any two people. That's always been true, May said. What changes is who gets to tell their version in rooms where decisions are made. A breeze tugged at her hair. Across the way, a curtain shifted in the Jenkins front window. She felt eyes on them but didn't turn her head. We have 3 written accounts now, plus your messages and the notes you photographed. We'll keep gathering when we can. Tomorrow I'll help you submit an online complaint, not just to the local station but to the precinct's community liaison. They're supposed to track this kind of dismissive behavior. And Dad? Lila asked, almost as an afterthought, though the word carried a lot of weight. And your father, May said, which starts tonight. Daniel came home just after sunset. The sky outside streaked purple and gold. May and Lila were in the kitchen, papers spread across the table, printed screenshots, handwritten statements, dates scribbled in the margins. The overhead light cast a warm circle over their small evidence island. Smells good in here, Daniel called as he shrugged off his jacket, dropping his keys in the bowl by habit. He stepped into the doorway, loosening his tie. You two plotting world domination or just reorganizing the spice rack again? He smiled, pleasantly oblivious, until he took in their serious faces and the scattered pages. The smile thinned. Okay, he said slowly. This looks official. It is, May said. She kept her voice even. It's our street. On paper. Daniel glanced at the sheets. At Lila's underlined note that read, second note, watch yourself after dark. Left on windshield. 8:12 a.m. and at Mrs. Alvarez's neat handwriting describing the day the stroller nearly tipped. He frowned. I thought we agreed I'd talk to the Jenkins family, he said. Man to man. No need to escalate. We did not agree, May said. You told the officers you would. That's different. She gestured to the chair across from her. Sit please. Leela swallowed and stood up. I'll leave you two to it, she murmured, gathering some of the papers into a stack. You don't have to go, May said gently. I kind of do, Leela replied. If I stay, I'm just going to shout. And then we'll get nowhere, and Dad will say we're proving the officers right about me being intense. She gave a tired half smile. Text me if anyone starts throwing plates. No plates will be thrown, May said, and Daniel gave her a startled look, as if the idea had never occurred to him. After Lila retreated to her room, Daniel sighed and sank into the chair. Look, May, he began. I get that she's upset, but gathering statements. That's how you turn neighbors into opponents. You know how thin the line is between community and chaos. We've spent years building trust on this street. And what do you think happens to that trust? May asked quietly. When people like Mrs. Alvarez nearly push their babies into the road and decide it's not worth speaking up because no one will listen. She slid the handwritten page toward him. Read what she wrote. Not my version. Hers. Daniel skimmed the sheet, lips pressing into a line. I didn't know this happened, he said. She didn't tell you, May said, because she didn't trust that it would matter. She leaned back, fingers laced together. You have a gift, Daniel. When people are angry, you can talk them down. When meetings go sideways, you can find the middle ground and make everyone feel heard. That gift has helped this neighborhood a lot. Her gaze sharpened. But today you used it like a blanket. You covered up your daughter's fear so the officers could feel comfortable going back to their routine. He bristled. I was trying to keep them from taking anything out on her, he said. I've seen what happens when people get on their bad side. If they think she's a troublemaker, they might stop listening entirely. They already did, May said gently. Not because she was loud, because they didn't see her as someone whose story mattered. You backed that up without meaning to. She softened her voice. When you told them she was passionate, they heard overreacts. When you promised to talk to the neighbors, they heard we don't have to do anything. You gave them a way to walk away feeling like they'd handled it. That wasn't my intent, Daniel muttered. Intent doesn't erase impact, May replied. You of all people taught our children that. The words landed heavily. For a moment, Daniel stared at the table, fingers tapping a restless rhythm against the wood. Finally, he inhaled, slow and deep. So what do you want me to do? He asked, the question stripped of defensiveness. First, May said, I want you to listen to Lila. Really listen. Not to find the calmest angle, not to help the officers or the neighbors feel better, to understand how it felt to stand in the station and watch them believe everyone but her. She nodded toward the hallway. Tonight, you go to her room and ask, what did I do that hurt you today? Then you don't interrupt. He winced slightly, but nodded. And after that, we stop playing this like a private spat. May said, we submit these statements to the community liaison office. We ask for a meeting, not just about the trucks, but about the way harassment gets dismissed as jokes and how easy it is for officers to label a young woman as dramatic. Instead of documenting possible threats, she held his gaze. We invite you to stand beside us. If you can't, we'll still go, but I'd rather fight this as a family. Daniel exhaled, shoulders sagging. You know this could get messy, he said. The Jenkins family, the online group, the officers, people might say we're stirring up trouble. They already are, May said. The difference is whether that trouble leads to change or just more quiet suffering. He sat there a long moment, looking at the sheets, the names, the dates. Finally he reached out and straightened the top page, a small gesture that meant more than he realized. All right, he said, I'll talk to her, and if she wants me there at that meeting, I'll come. I won't smooth it over. I'll back her up. Later, from behind her bedroom door, Leela heard a soft knock and her father's voice asking if he could come in. She hesitated, heart pounding, then opened the door just enough for him to step through. The conversation that followed wasn't magical or flawlessly worded. He stumbled over apologies, tried to explain, caught himself and finally did what May had begged him to do. He listened. As he listened, something in Leela's face shifted, not forgiving everything at once, not forgetting how his air quotes had stung, but moving from raw shock to something sturdier. Her world was still unfair. The police still hadn't believed her. The notes and online jokes still existed. But in that small room, with posters on the wall and a mug of cold tea on the nightstand, one thing changed. She was no longer the only person carrying the weight of her story. Down the hall, May sat at the kitchen table, the stack of statements neatly aligned, a pen resting on top. Outside, the truck sat heavy and unmoved, and somewhere, the boys who had laughed online were likely still scrolling, still joking. The world had not transformed overnight, but in one house on that street, a different kind of work had begun, quiet, patient, stubborn, the kind that starts when someone says, "I believe you," and then proves it by what they do next. If you'd like, I can continue the story and show what happens when May and Leela take their evidence to the community liaison and how the neighborhood responds. The next morning dawned soft and pale, the kind of light that made the neighborhood look gentler than it behaved. May stood at the kitchen counter slicing apples while the kettle warmed, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator and the rustling outside as people prepared for their day. She could feel the tension of the coming hours, the meetings, the emails, the conversations that might open doors or slam them shut. But she held on to the quiet of the moment like a grounding stone. Leela walked in wearing sweatpants and an oversized hoodie, hair pulled into a loose bun that suggested she hadn't slept much. Even so, there was something steadier in her posture, a subtle shift from the brittle exhaustion of the night before. She gave May a small, tentative smile. "Dad and I talked," she said, moving toward the counter. "For real this time. He actually tried. He said he's sorry for how things went at the station." She took an apple slice and chewed thoughtfully. "He also said he didn't realize how scared I was. He assumed I was angry." "Fear and anger often wear the same jacket," May said softly. "People just notice whichever color is louder." She handed Leela a mug of warm tea. "How do you feel today?" "Still embarrassed," Leela admitted, still kind of humiliated. "But also," she searched for the word, "seen, I guess." She tapped her fingers along the mug. "Dad wants to help today. He said he'll come with us to the liaison office, but he wants to talk to the Jenkinses first." May lifted an eyebrow. "As in, before we file anything?" "No," Leela said quickly. "He didn't say that, just that he wants to clear the air with them so things don't blow up on the street while we deal with the complaint. He asked if I wanted him to. Honestly, I'm not sure. Part of me wants him to stop being the neighborhood diplomat for once, but another part," she sighed, "another part wants him to be the person who stands up for me in front of other adults." May nodded, seeing the complexity clearly. "We can decide together," she said. "Talking to the Jenkinses might help, or it might give them room to twist the story again. The important thing is that you choose the approach, not the pressure around you." Before Leela could answer, Daniel stepped into the room, running a hand through his hair. For once, he looked unsure, almost shy. "Morning," he said. "I stopped by the Jenkins house on my run, just to see if they were around. I didn't say anything yet." Leela blinked. "You went already?" "Only to check," he said quickly. "I wasn't going to knock without talking to you, but Mr. Jenkins was outside loading something into his truck. He saw me and waved. I pretended I didn't notice and kept going." He gave a self-conscious shrug. "Figured I'd wait for instructions." May hid a small smile behind her teacup. That at least was progress. They spent the next hour printing clean copies of the statements, organizing screenshots, writing the dates clearly across the tops of pages. Daniel insisted on bringing a folder so nothing would get wrinkled. Leela kept reading her own statements, editing little phrases, making sure every detail was accurate. Watching her check and recheck the pages stirred a strange ache in May. This was the same little girl who used to rewrite birthday invitations until the letters looked perfect. Worried someone would misread her. Some people grew out of that carefulness. Leela had grown into it. Before they left, May said, "We should try one more house. Someone who doesn't get involved in neighborhood drama. Who might give a version of the street that isn't colored by personal grudges." "Who?" Leela asked. May smiled. "Mr. Stanton, the retired librarian with the cactus collection." Leela's eyes widened. "He barely speaks." "Exactly," May replied. "When quiet people choose to speak, it carries weight." Mr. Stanton lived in the small yellow house with the blue shutters and the carefully arranged garden full of cacti in ceramic pots that he painted himself. When May knocked, she half expected him not to answer. He often ignored the world unless he had a reason not to, but today, he opened the door with a cautious expression, as though he'd sensed something unusual in the air. "Good morning," he said in his gravel-soft voice. "Is everything all right on the street?" "We're trying to make it more all right," May said gently. "May we talk for a moment?" He stepped aside and let them into the living room, where sunlight fell across shelves of books arranged by handwritten labels. Leela admired the neat rows of plant pots on the windowsill, each cactus carefully spaced, each pot uniquely painted with subtle gradients. May explained the situation, not the drama. Not the personal parts, just the facts. The blocked sidewalks, the online mockery, the threatening notes, the police dismissal. Mr. Stanton listened without interrupting, hands folded neatly in his lap. When Lila finished, he nodded slowly. I've seen the trucks, he said. They block the path for the postal worker sometimes. I mentioned it once, years ago, and Mr. Jenkins laughed like I'd told a joke, so I stopped mentioning things. His gaze moved to Lila. When people mock you publicly, it is rarely about you. It is about their fear of being held accountable. Lila inhaled sharply. The words hit somewhere that had been sore for days. Would you be willing to write a statement? May asked softly. Just your experience with the sidewalks. Nothing more. Mr. Stanton leaned back, thinking. Yes, he said finally. If this helps the street become safer, then yes. He stood and shuffled to his writing desk. Do you prefer cursive or print? Whichever is easiest for you, May said. He wrote carefully, almost elegantly, each line slow but firm. When he handed the page to Lila, she accepted it like something fragile. It wasn't long or dramatic. Just a simple account of blocked paths and a sense of being dismissed when he'd tried to speak years before. But it mattered. She could feel it. When they stepped outside again, Lila let out a long breath. Okay, she said. I'm ready. At the community liaison office, the waiting room smelled faintly of pine cleaner and warm paper. A bulletin board advertised neighborhood workshops and safety meetings. Lila's foot tapped a restless rhythm until May gently placed a hand over it. A liaison officer named Marin greeted them, a woman in her 40s with warm eyes and a straightforward posture. She led them to a small meeting room and closed the door. Tell me what happened, she said, not as a challenge but as an invitation. This time, as Lila spoke, Daniel didn't interrupt. He didn't soften things or translate them into calmer language. He just listened, occasionally nodding, hands clasped so tightly the knuckles blanched. May watched him with quiet pride. He wasn't perfect, but he was trying. Officer Marin read through the written statements, flipping pages slowly, eyebrows drawing together. She asked clarifying questions, not doubting ones, but practical ones. What time was this? Did anyone else witness it? Do you have screenshots of the comments? For the first time since the incident began, Lila felt like someone in authority wasn't trying to shrink the situation into something convenient. This is valid, Officer Marin said firmly after a few minutes. All of it. This isn't a trivial neighborhood squabble. Unaddressed harassment can escalate. Dismissive responses from first responders can make people feel unsafe in their own communities. She took a sip of her coffee. I'll review this with the district supervisor and make sure the earlier officers receive guidance. But more importantly, we'll open a formal record. You did the right thing by documenting everything. Lila blinked rapidly. So, you believe me? Marin's gaze softened. Believing you is the beginning. Acting is the real work. May felt something warm spread in her chest, a small but powerful relief. Daniel exhaled shakily. Thank you, he said. Really, I'll contact you in a few days with next steps, Marin said as they walked out of the building. Sunlight washed over them, bright and honest. Lila stopped on the sidewalk and looked at May. This feels different, she said. Not fixed, but not hopeless. May slipped an arm around her shoulders. That's how real change starts, she said. Not with fireworks, with small, steady steps. Lila leaned into her side, the tension finally easing from her posture. Behind them, Daniel cleared his throat. So, he said awkwardly, ice cream, or too early? For the first time in days, Lila laughed soft but real. Never too early, she said, and together, they walked toward the car, three people still learning, still stumbling, but moving forward in the same direction at last. By late afternoon, the street had begun to settle into its usual rhythm, the distant thump of a basketball somewhere, the soft clatter of someone bringing in recycling bins, the low hum of engines as people returned home from work. But beneath the ordinary sounds, something felt different to Lila. Not louder, not calmer, just changed, like the air was waiting. May noticed it too. As they walked back from the car toward the house, her eyes skimmed over the familiar porches, the trimmed hedges, the driveways she had seen for years. But now those quiet facades held stories she had gathered: Mrs. Alvarez's near accident, Mr. Stanton's long-ignored complaint, the murmured frustrations of neighbors who had given up speaking because they assumed no one would ever listen. This block had always been hers to tend. In small ways, today, she felt it shift under her hands like soil being turned over, ready for new growth, or for weeds to be pulled up. Lila unlocked the front door, and Daniel slipped inside behind them, For a few minutes they moved around each other silently, Leela washing her hands, Daniel hanging his keys, May filling a glass of water, a normal routine after an abnormal day. But then Leela paused, leaning her palms against the counter. "Mom," she said softly, "what happens now, with the neighbors, and the Jenkinses and, well, everything?" May set down the pitcher. "Now," she said gently, "we stay steady. We don't hide, we don't escalate, and we don't shrink. We let the liaison office handle their part. Our job is to keep gathering truth, living our life, and refusing to be intimidated." Daniel nodded, but worry tugged at his brow. "I just hope this doesn't create more friction on the street," he murmured. "The Jenkinses aren't known for taking criticism, well?" Leela crossed her arms. "Yeah, I've noticed." Before anyone could reply, 3 knocks thudded against the front door, firm, not angry, but unmistakable. May exchanged a quick look with Daniel, then opened the door. Standing on the porch was Mrs. Harris from 2 houses down. She wore her gardening apron still dusted with soil and held a small envelope between her fingers. Her expression was tight, cautious. "Hi," she said, glancing past May toward the living room. "Sorry to drop by unannounced. I heard from Mr. Stanton, not the details, but just that you all were collecting some kind of statement about the sidewalks and the posts." May stepped aside. "You can come in, if you want." Mrs. Harris hesitated, then shook her head. "I won't stay long. I just wanted to give you this." She held out the envelope. "I wrote down what happened last summer when one of the boys kicked over my recycling bin and yelled at me when I asked him to stop. I never reported it because I figured, well." She gave a small, brittle laugh. "Who listens to an older lady complaining about teenagers?" "Thank you," May said warmly. "This means a lot." "It's not much," Mrs. Harris replied, already backing away. "But I figured, if you're making a record, maybe add this too. They shouldn't treat people like we don't matter." She gave Lila a sympathetic nod. "I'm sorry, dear. I saw the post online. They had no right." Leela swallowed. "Thank you," she said softly. After Mrs. Harris walked off, Daniel closed the door and let out a low whistle. "People are coming to us now." "That's unexpected, no," May said, turning the envelope in her hand. "It means they were waiting for someone to go first." Word traveled fast on their block, not in loud, gossip-heavy waves, but in quiet ripples. By evening, 2 more neighbors had sent messages. One describing a near collision caused by the trucks jutting out into the street. Another recalling overhearing the Jenkins boys mocking younger kids walking to school. Not everyone reached out, and not everyone would, but the silence that had once felt like indifference now felt more like fear cracking open just a bit. Around sunset, as the sky turned amber, Daniel stood on the porch staring at the Jenkins house across the street. The trucks sat as they always did, taking up too much space, casting too much shadow. The curtains in the living room twitched. "I think they know something's up," Daniel murmured. "They always know something's up," May replied. "The question is what they'll do about it." As if cued, the Jenkins front door swung open, and Mr. Jenkins himself strode out broad-shouldered, wearing a work-stained jacket, his expression a tight scowl. He headed directly toward their house. Leela stiffened beside May. "Oh no," she whispered. "Stay behind me," Daniel said gently, not fearfully, but protectively. Mr. Jenkins reached the bottom of their steps and planted his boots wide. "Evening," he said, voice clipped. "I hear you're stirring the pot." May stood taller. "We're documenting safety concerns," she said calmly. "Not stirring anything." "That's funny," he said, leaning back slightly, "because my boys tell me you're trying to turn the whole neighborhood against them, accusing them of harassment, making them look like criminals over a bit of harmless teasing." "Teasing?" Lila stepped forward before she could stop herself. Her pulse hammered, but her voice held. "Leaving threatening notes isn't teasing. Recording me without context isn't teasing. Blocking the sidewalk isn't teasing." Mr. Jenkins snorted. "Look, you're young. People joke around online. My boys didn't mean anything by it. You're blowing this out of proportion." "Sir," Daniel cut in, tone surprisingly firm. "With all due respect, your sons edited a video to humiliate her. They encouraged others to pile on. That's not harmless, and it's not funny." Jenkins's eyes flicked to Daniel, calculating, irritated. "Didn't expect you to take their side," he said. "Thought you were the reasonable one?" "I wasn't being reasonable," Daniel said quietly. "I was being dismissive. I won't make that mistake again." Silence hung for a moment. Something in Mr. Jenkins's expression shifted, not softening, but reassessing. He looked between the 3 of them, jaw tightening. "Well," he said finally, "if you want to make this official, We'll see what the city has to say. Don't cry to me when this neighborhood gets divided. May met his narrowed gaze. Sometimes neighborhoods need to be shaken before they can settle into something healthier. He muttered something under his breath, pivoted, and stomped back toward his house. When the door slammed behind him, Leela sagged slightly. That was intense, she breathed. Daniel exhaled shakily. I can't believe I just said that to him. May placed a hand on his arm. You did well. Then she turned to Lila. You too. Later that night, the three of them sat in the living room with the curtains open, watching the street quietly. No fireworks. No chaos. Just the slow, cautious settling of a community realizing something was changing. And they couldn't ignore it anymore. Leela leaned her head on May's shoulder. I don't know where this is going, she murmured. You don't have to know yet, May replied. What matters is that you're no longer standing alone. Daniel nodded, folding his hands. We'll keep going. Together. Outside, a breeze rustled the leaves. The streetlights came on one by one, bathing the block in soft gold. Not a perfect piece, but a watchful one. A new beginning. Over the next week, the neighborhood felt as if it were caught between breaths. Conversations quieted when May or Lila passed by. Windows that had always remained open now occasionally clicked shut. People lingered on porches longer than usual, sipping tea or pretending to check their plants while their eyes followed the shifting undercurrents on the block. But beneath all the wary stillness, something else was happening, something Leela could feel even if she couldn't always name it. A loosening, a subtle but present shift away from fear and toward honesty. The community liaison office contacted them. 2 days later, Officer Marin scheduled a follow-up meeting for Saturday morning, explaining in her calm, steady voice that she had reviewed the statements and spoken with the district supervisor about the initial police response. We take this seriously, she'd said. Please come in. There are steps we want to discuss. When Lila hung up the call, she felt a strange mix of relief and dread. She wasn't used to being taken seriously in official spaces. Not after the station had brushed her off so easily, the first time. Her hands shook slightly as she set down the phone. May noticed. Hey, she murmured, touching Leela's wrist. This isn't them judging you. This is them correcting their own failure. It just feels big, Lila whispered, and I still feel small. That feeling doesn't mean you are, May replied gently. Daniel chimed in from the dining table, where he was organizing the now growing collection of neighbor statements. We'll go together, he said. You're not walking into that room alone. For the first time, Leela nodded without hesitation. Saturday morning arrived with soft gray clouds and cool air. The three of them walked into the liaison building side by side. May carried the folder. Daniel held himself straighter than usual. Leela wore her hair pinned back neatly, not for them, but for herself. A silent declaration that she was not a mess to be dismissed. Officer Marin welcomed them with a serious but encouraging smile. They sat around a round table instead of the rectangular one from before. A subtle shift, but meaningful. Round tables meant collaboration. Thank you for coming, she began. I want to start by acknowledging something clearly. The officers who first spoke with you did not follow proper procedure. They minimized your concerns, and they failed to record key information. We will be addressing that internally. Lila felt a jolt in her chest, sharp, unexpected. To hear someone in uniform say it plainly felt like having a knot slowly untie inside her. Marin continued. We have opened an official case regarding the harassment, the notes, and the online targeting. I want to ask a few questions about the timeline, and then we'll discuss next steps. This time, everything felt different. Marin scribbled precise notes. She asked thoughtful follow-up questions. She referred to the statements as testimonies. She asked permission to attach each one to the case file. She treated Lila not like a problem but like a witness. When they finished, Marin said, You acted responsibly, you collected evidence, you sought help, and you tried to resolve things peacefully. The failure was not yours. Lila looked down at her hands. For a long moment, she couldn't speak. Then, in a small voice that surprised even her, she said, Thank you. Marin smiled gently. We'll be in touch soon. And please, if anything else happens, even something small, call me directly. When they walked out into the parking lot, the clouds had parted slightly, letting a beam of sunlight fall across the pavement. Daniel let out a breath he'd been holding. I didn't expect it to go that well, he admitted. I'm proud of you, Lee. Lila's throat tightened, but she smiled. I'm proud of us, she said. May gave her daughter's hand a squeeze. You did more than stand up for yourself, she said softly. You showed others they could speak to. That afternoon, the ripple of truth moved through the street again, but now, it wasn't fear that followed. It was a conversation. Mrs. Alvarez waved from her porch, holding Diego on her hip. "Good luck today," she called. Leela nodded. "Better than good." Mr. Stanton gave a subtle nod from his window, not smiling but looking more at ease than usual. Even neighbors who hadn't been supportive seemed less rigid, more curious, more aware. And then there was the Jenkins house. The trucks were still there, still oversized, still encroaching, but the atmosphere around them felt tense, like they belonged to someone suddenly aware of being observed. The younger Jenkins boy stood on the driveway, scrolling on his phone. When he saw Lila, he hesitated and lowered the device, not mocking, not smirking, just uncertain. It wasn't an apology, but it wasn't defiance either. A small step, a crack in the veneer. Leela met his gaze for a moment, then looked away, not out of fear, but because she refused to give him the stage anymore. That evening, the neighborhood association message board lit up not with jokes or insults, but with something else entirely. One post said, "Sidewalks need to be safe for everyone. Maybe it's time we discuss parking again." Another said, "Reminder, recording someone to mock them isn't acceptable behavior. Let's keep our streets supportive." A third, from someone anonymous but brave enough to speak up. Read, "Some of us have stayed quiet about issues because we didn't think it mattered. Seeing others speak makes me think maybe it does." Leela stared at the screen, eyes widening. "They're actually talking about it," she whispered.